Hello everyone, and thank you for joining today. And I guess if you're watching this on recording later, thank you too. Before we get started, I just wanted to make you aware this webinar is being recorded and will be shared afterwards. If you have any questions about anything at all that I discussed today, my contact details will be available at the end, and we'll also be sharing the deck, so no need to take any notes. But first of all, I'm Ricky, US Sales Manager for Team Breww. My background was in commercial brewing for around 3 years before joining the team here. So I know all too well what your day-to-day looks like. I'll be sharing my experiences from my production days, but also whilst working with our diverse range of customers and discussing the sorts of challenges that they've been facing. But first, just before we get into the content, I just want to talk and give you a little bit of context around Breww and who we are and what we do. So Breww was launched in 2018, and we describe ourselves as an end-to-end or all-in-one software, where essentially we aim at managing all aspects of running a brewery, from ordering your ingredients to managing your brewing process, so recipes, quality control, as well as managing your customers with our own inbuilt CRM system, all the way to managing your distributors, whether that's through your tap room, a distributor, a distribution partner, carrier services, or self-distro of your own vehicles. We work with breweries of all sizes, so we have teams of a few people or even a single person, all the way up to teams of hundreds of staff. And basically, our journey so far within the industry has included developing features and functionality for breweries through some of the toughest periods of the industry in recent memory, which has allowed us to build up a very close understanding of the challenges that we are occupying, that they are occupying the minds of our customers, essentially. So on to the content of today's webinar. Today, of course, is all about taking a close look at the importance of building traceability into your brewery and processes. And we'll be looking at what we mean by traceability and why it's important, including how it helps to ensure that the quality, consistency, and safety of your product is always as high as possible, and how it helps you to improve your beer, your sales and general operations, and ultimately how it will save you time and money. We'll also be discussing some practical scenarios that traceability will help solve, and digging into how to actually implement traceability into your day-to-day, and how to overcome the pain points you might encounter trying to build traceability into your brewery. For example, how to do it without it becoming too painful or time-consuming of a process. So first, I guess we need to kind of define what here at Breww we refer to as traceability. And typically when people think about traceability, they think of, tracking a lot code of an ingredient from its arrival on site to which batches it's been brewed in, and ultimately where it's been delivered to. And while this is absolutely a key part and something we'll cover in some of our practical examples later, traceability covers a lot more than just this, in our opinion. It means tracking your fermentation readings and tracking them in a way that you can easily compare them to other batches. It means tracking which batches you've cropped and repitched your yeast from, and tracing and forecasting its viability and cost. Knowing who's responsible for an equipment clean and when, and having records of who did it, when they did it, and with which chemicals and lot codes they used. Tracking exactly what your stock levels are, as well as sales and distribution, so you're always aware of financial performance and have the records needed for your TTB reporting. And if you use your own kegs, do you know where they are? Kegs aren't cheap. Keeping your loss rate as low as possible is going to help maximize your return on investment and ultimately improve your profit margins. And from our diagram here, when we talk about traceability, we're literally talking about tracking everything: who, what, when, and how, from end to end. And I'm sure all of you are aware, things have been getting tougher out there for breweries. A recent Brewers Association craft beer report highlights that while demand is down, 5.1% from the previous year, the number of US breweries has continued to grow, so supply is actually up. And the long and short of this means that competition has obviously increased, and so standing out from your competition is therefore really important. So finding improvements in your operations wherever you can is going to be the key to maintaining or growing your margins and your sales in a competitive market, essentially. Now, I'm sure you will recognise the challenges we have on this slide. All of these examples are areas where clear traceability throughout your processes provides quick and actionable answers. These include your quality control processes, costings and continuous recipe improvements, and capturing these common pain points so you're able to monitor, measure, and actively account manage these issues is key. You know, whether it's for the benefit of your taproom customers, your self-distro customers, or managing feedback from your distribution partner. I'm a big believer in a quote that I stole from the founder of one of my favorite breweries: "You're only as good as your last beer." You know, reputation and brand recognition can be lost in an instant if you send out a beer and it isn't consistent with what your customers expect. So, you know, a couple of examples here, you know, take exploding cans, for example. Being able to isolate batches, test, and react with a recall if needed is essential. You know, people don't appreciate their walls covered in Imperial Stout. Why are my batch costs so high? You know, it's tough out there, and ensuring your 30 cents on a dollar in sales doesn't shrink, you know, due to using a supplier that fits not only with your quality parameters, but also your margins as well. And, you know, striving to make your recipes better. Are they great as they are already? And how are you measuring this? You know, as brewers and as a former brewer, you know, we can become obsessed with perfection. But if our customers love our beers already, you know, have we already achieved perfection? And for the remainder of the webinar, you know, we'll be focusing our attention, as I said, on 3 key and common areas where traceability is so important and where it helps to avoid and solve headaches. So the first is the goods in and beer out recalls. So essentially recalls from both sides of the equation, you know, tracing an ingredient from purchase to sale, but also tracing a sale back to the batch that was delivered. Our second scenario will outline the importance of traceability when you notice that an in-progress batch is of poor quality and best practices for capturing that data. And finally, we'll look at its importance when you receive a customer complaint, either about a missed delivery or a poor quality product. So scenario 1, our first practical scenario we'll be looking at is end-to-end batch traceability. So let's say we have an instance where our malt supplier contacts us. They've informed us that they had a serious issue in the malting process of a batch of malt, whatever that may be, but to the point where anything brewed with it is absolutely, it cannot be sold to a customer, essentially. Now, if we don't know where we've used this batch of malt, then we have a pretty serious problem. We don't know which batches are affected, and therefore, worst case scenario, we might have to waste any recent batches we even suspect might have used it. And out of fear of, you know, accidentally poisoning someone with an affected batch, which we can safely say the effect of that on our reputation might be a whole lot worse than the cost of those wasted batches of beer. And as a basic framework of a solution to minimize the damage of an event like this, we need to know which lot codes we're using in which batches, allowing us to identify the affected batches, of course. And we can enhance this as well by ensuring that we use a FIFO system, you know, a first expiry, first out, which I'm sure you're all aware of, you know, which means that we're always using the oldest lots first and allowing the supplier more time to contact us before we've even used the lot in one of our batches. And then on the flip side, we're going to have to know, you know, which batches we've gone on to deliver to customers, who we've delivered to and when, which will allow us to perform an effective and efficient recall. You know, we'll go into more detail on this actually in the next slide, and how we can record this information and work it into our processes with minimal effort. But another just quick example here is where we get a report from a customer about, you know, a foreign object found in a can, meaning we now have to urgently recall anything that might be similarly affected. And with this type of recall, we need to work backwards, right? So from the batch we sent out, we need to know which batch we sent to that customer. We ideally need to know also which packaging run it was on, as well as the lot code for the cans that we've used, and even being able to, you know, say the canning machine or the piece of equipment that we've used as well. And with all of that information, we'll be able to work out whether the issue could be localized to just a single packaging run, or the piece of equipment used, or indeed the lot code of cans. And ultimately, having that traceability to find the specific problem will allow us to quarantine a much smaller portion of our stock or our inventory and minimize the cost as much as possible, rather than having to cast our net much wider and recall much more than we perhaps would need to, and at a much greater cost. So from that, we have a solution to our problem there, but how do we actually ensure we're recording this information? Because on the surface of it, it sounds like a lot. So the first thing I'd like to highlight is that sometimes a simple mindset change can go a long way. Often we might skip something because it doesn't feel important. People can place a low importance on something that hasn't happened to them yet. And if it isn't until they have a problem that they suddenly realize and see the benefit of tracking what they do. But beyond that, there are more practical ways in which we can make it easier and less, burdensome to get this key information recorded. The first and obvious one is to record it on an easy to use and intuitive digital system. Obviously, no names mentioned. And this allows you to record the data with minimal effort, and you'll thank yourself down the line. Because ultimately, recording this digitally, it's very important for another reason. Traceability is fantastic as a concept, but the other side of the traceability coin is obviously reportability. Once you have tracked something, having it in a reportable format means that you can get actionable data from it quickly. And we'll go into some examples of this later. But if you track something but can't use it, for example, because it means looking through tons of paper documents or checking multiple spreadsheets to the point where you get lost, you've done all of that work for no real benefit. And in addition, ensure you have a rigorous process, such as having a clear goods in checklist, that can be recorded again digitally and reported on so that you never miss any checks. And if you're running the business alone, and wearing many hats, this means you don't have to keep as much in your head. Or if you're in a team, this will allow you the ability to sign off tasks as complete by a team member, or to just measure these as tasks as being completed, or indeed both. And introduce, packaging approvals or sign-off procedures for your processes within that system. And this is really important from a quality control perspective, and will provide proof and confidence that the beer going out of the door is to your high standard. For example, setting a acceptable ABV ranges in the system that could be locked out, sensory testing within that system and recorded. And, if you're removing gluten from a beer, for example, testing that it's an acceptable range for consumers who might be celiac, it ensures that that threshold isn't met. And another key aspect is recording something as it happens. This massively reduces the burden of that task. For example, brew sheet data on a brew day, either on a tablet or a phone. It makes it easy to ensure that all quality control data is there ready when you need it, without it being paper-based. So it's not reportable, or it's making an additional time-consuming job of typing up the results later. Running a brewery is an intense process. It's a tough thing to do. And if you've created an additional typing up job, it's going to get skipped in a busy day, and sometimes just take you away from ultimately what you're doing, which is making and selling great beer. Now, another scenario to consider is where you've noticed that a quality of an in-progress batch of beer isn't where it needs to be. So let's say in this case, we have a classic case of a batch of simply become infected. Now, unless you can somehow salvage this into a sour beer, you're going to likely have to dump this batch entirely on the floor and absorb the significant cost that comes with that. Now, a problem like this could be the result of, a supplier batch issue, such as quality, or maybe even a mislabeling of a product. But more likely, it's probably to do with the result of an improper equipment clean. Either way, we need to find out how this has happened so that we can prevent it from happening again. So how can we do that, essentially? So the first step that I would suggest is to ensure we have a proper and comprehensive cleaning log for all of our equipment. If we have those, we can either satisfy ourselves that they have been done properly and rule out the issue being with our processes, or it will highlight that something wasn't completed fully or properly. For example, if a record was missing, or records of a bacterial check or photo was not part of the final result, we might think to ourselves this clean wasn't performed properly. And if we've recorded the chemicals that we've used in our CIP, then we're in a position to identify whether that batch of caustic used has been used for the first time, or maybe it was used past its expiry date. If it's the first use of this lot code, and then we can investigate whether it's an issue with this batch. And essentially we can dispose of it before it ruins even more batches, and again gives you that full traceability view. And likewise, if you've recorded the batches of yeast, that you're cropped and repitched between batches, we can investigate whether that might have been the issue as well. So maybe this particular strain of yeast isn't as viable later in its genealogy than we first thought. And instead of being able to use it across 10 batches, it's too weak to ferment properly by batch 5. An infection was able to take hold and obviously create those sour flavours. So therefore, having this level of detail and traceability allows us to quickly check through our theories, rule them out or confirm them, allowing us to get to the root cause of the issue quickly, which is essential. Now, as I mentioned in the last slide, having proper cleaning processes and records can be so key to preventing issues like infection. And if they do happen, identifying how it has happened. So, for example, how do we keep proper cleaning at the heart of our brewhouse processes? After all, brewing is like the 80-20 rule, 80% cleaning, 20% fun stuff and admin. So I found the best way of keeping cleaning processes up to scratch is by having your processes, again, recorded digitally, which helps to make it easier to review and improve them. But it also gives accountability to the whole team on who is doing what and what exactly they need to be doing with this process. So, make sure when someone is performing a complex cleaning or maintenance task, for example, that they know every step that they need to take. Leave nothing to someone's memory, have that full SOP process within the system. I've been there in my early career when, a person with that process in their head was sick and uncontactable, which snowballs into other issues and delays your schedule, not to mention causing your assistant stress. So likewise, ensure the same with your recipes. Make sure that the steps, ingredients, the readings that are required are comprehensively recorded. Again, if a key member of staff is unavailable for whatever reason, having a comprehensive process and an easy way to record information and follow these steps means you're never going to be caught short when someone less familiar has to step in. And also, record more than just which raw materials you use in your batches. Record your chemicals you're using in your cleaning processes so that you can see when you're running low. You can ensure that you're never unable to complete a clean properly, but also so which lot codes have been used to clean with which vessels. So if you've ever used a digital system where you've been tracking which batches have moved through the vessels, including one that can track properly blended or split batches of beer all the way through the batch's life cycle, not only from a cost point of view, but obviously for that traceability journey as well. And you're also able to track which batches a single cleaner has been responsible for. So if there ever was a problem due to a cleaning issue, immediately all of the batches which have been affected. And to take that a bit further in a bigger team, consider adding secondary checks to your processes if possible. Where another member of your team is able to sign that off, that everything has been done and done to a required standard, again ensuring that level of accountability. You can also incorporate alerts for when a process is required to help ensure nothing is ever missed. It's particularly helpful and useful when managing your equipment, and it allows you to perform a preventative maintenance schedule rather than a run to fail, right? Equipment always seems to go wrong at the worst possible moment, when you're mashing in, when you're sparging. So maintenance alert will keep you ahead of any issues and, stay true to that preventative strategy. And having these records is not only a big benefit to you, it also means that if you ever have an inspection or a spot check, it becomes a breeze to simply provide an audit trail of all of your processes. And our final example, and everyone's favorite, customer complaints. So let's say you have a customer on the phone who are complaining about the quality of the beer you've sent them. For example, excess fobbing or an off flavour that they believe they have identified. Either way, you'll obviously want to investigate whether you have a quality problem that you need to get ahead of, or whether this is a problem on the customer's end with their storage, their serving and dispensing equipment, or just general cleanliness. So even if a customer is simply trying it on and trying to get some cash off their next order. And like our previous example, to solve this properly, we need to know exactly which batches we've sent them so that we have a starting point for that investigation. And once we know that, we can check that the quality of the batch was where we expected. So we need to have fermentation and other QC readings like vessel temperatures and things like that. And we need to be able to compare these against other batches of the same beer so that we can see if they've ever had any complaints. And ultimately to satisfy ourselves that there wasn't an obvious problem with the quality control targets that we'd set. So in addition, if you record pre-packaging quality controls like, taste checks and notes, you'll be able to quickly refer back to your notes from the time, give yourself the confidence that either the batch was exactly up to the standard that you would have expected before sending out your beer, or maybe something was flagged at the time, and you're able then to see that the problem is actually worse than you first thought. And, with proper sales and batch traceability, you'd also have all of your customer returns logged. So is this customer a repeat offender with a records of complaints? We can quickly identify customers that frequently complain to the point where it might be something on their side rather than yours. And you'll also be able to see if the batch itself has an unusually high level of complaints, both of which again help you identify where the issue might be. And again, having this high level of record keeping and detail is going to keep making and getting on top of the problem so much easier, and it will allow you to get on top of them before they start to spiral out of control. The other side of the customer complaint sort of agenda is ensuring the quality of our distribution is high. So whether that is a distribution partner, a courier service, or your own self-distribution, or maybe even your tap room, your sales team, your delivery drivers, your tap room staff, they work in your shop window, and they have access to the biggest source of feedback from your customers, which can be hugely important in key in knowing how your beer is being received. So make sure your sales team have access to, a customer relationship management tool that will allow them to easily record all of their customer feedback from their phones, from anywhere that they are. And if they're on the road and receive some feedback, the danger is that this information will just stay in their heads until it's forgotten. Whereas if they can record it immediately from anywhere, you're much less likely to lose that information, and you've recorded it in such a way that you can look back on it if you ever need to. And, a few of our examples here have required us to know which batches have been delivered to which customers, which again might sound like a painful task to record. This is where a system that produces barcoded stock labels that can be scanned. This essentially can be transformative. The reason all warehouses use scanners is because it is simply the fastest way of tracking inventory movement. So providing your team with access to this tool means that it's much easier to start recording batch distribution information, whether that's just to your tap room or out to a customer. It's allowing you to take advantage of all we've spoken about. And if costs are tight, use a supplier that has the ability to scan simply from your own phone and devices. So it's always possible to scan your products in and out of the brewery without the need to actually buy expensive scanners if that doesn't make sense. And for anyone doing self-distribution, if your delivery drivers are able to record signatures or proof of delivery photos on the road, it gives you that additional resource to use and check back in the event of any complaints. And everything I've mentioned here are things that you're probably doing already, right? But ultimately, having that system to navigate these processes easily takes us back to our comments on efficiency and an even better customer journey. I've done this with and without software myself professionally. And for me personally, software does win every time. But I do appreciate that I'm biased, of course. And so, based on everything we've been building towards, I wanted to start to wrap things up with some key takeaways and not keep the session too long. But essentially, there are lots of elements within the industry that are out of our control. So taking advantage of what you can control is important. Adding more insight to your operation, as we have discussed already, becoming more efficient will be a differentiator in a difficult market. We know greater efficiency leads to reduced costs and more time for revenue generating activities and ultimately selling more beer. Without proper record keeping, making improvements really is the unknown. How do we improve on what we don't know? And taking steps to improve beer quality should be a result of increasing efficiency, and greater quality and consistency will ultimately boost your reputation. So I guess to start ending things, I want to emphasize that, traceability doesn't have to be difficult. Use a system that makes it easy, embrace the mindset, and it will become second nature. I promise that you won't regret it. And, I just want to take this opportunity to thank everyone for listening. Andrew and the team will be sharing this recording afterwards for anyone interested in sharing it or rewatching. If you do have any questions, please get in touch with me on these details on the screen now. and I'll see obviously any comments post event too. But yeah, have a great day. I appreciate you. Thanks for joining, and enjoy the rest of your day.